The specimen jars arrived 3 days after Dr. Roland Pierce's funeral, delivered to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in a refrigerated truck that nobody had authorized. Maya Chen signed for them anyway, recognizing Roland's handwriting on the shipping manifest even though his hand should have been too unsteady to write anything legible during his final weeks. She wheeled the crates into her laboratory after hours, when the building emptied of grad students and visiting researchers. The institute felt different at night, the constant hum of filtration systems and air circulation creating white noise that made her hyper-aware of her own breathing. Roland had taught her to trust that instinct, the body's recognition of environmental changes before the conscious mind caught up. Inside the first crate, she found 12 sealed containers holding water samples, each labeled with coordinates from the Puerto Rico Trench. The dates ranged from April to August of the previous year, when Roland had been running his final research expedition. Maya had declined his invitation to join that trip, citing her own project deadlines. A decision she'd regretted every day since the Coast Guard had airlifted him back to shore with lungs that had somehow filled with fluid despite him never leaving the ship. The second crate contained Roland's personal research drive, wrapped in layers of waterproof material and a handwritten note, "Only open this in a sealed room. Check the air pressure first. I'm sorry, Maya. I should have burned it all." She set up the drive in the Institute's secure data room, a windowless space designed for classified military contracts. The door sealed with a magnetic lock, and wall-mounted sensors displayed atmospheric readings, oxygen at 20.9%, pressure at standard 101.3 kilopascals, temperature at 20 degrees Celsius. Everything normal. The drive contained 847 files organized by date, the oldest from March 1973. Maya opened the most recent entry, dated 5 days before Roland's death. The water samples are breathing. Not metaphorically. I've documented 17 distinct inhalation-exhalation cycles over the past 6 hours. The pressure fluctuations are minimal, barely registering on standard equipment, but they're there. Rhythmic. Purposeful. I made a mistake 49 years ago. We all did. Captain Hendricks, Dr. Voss, the entire crew of the Challenger Deep expedition. We found something in the trench that should have stayed undiscovered. Something that's been there since before Earth's atmosphere contained oxygen. And we brought samples back. The suffocation dream started for me last month. I wake up gasping in rooms full of air that my body refuses to process. It's not psychological. It's recognition. My lungs remember breathing something else, something that came up with those samples in 1973. Maya, if you're reading this, you'll start having the dreams soon. Proximity to the samples transfers contamination. I'm sorry. I needed someone to continue the work after I'm gone. Someone smart enough to find the solution I couldn't. Maya's chest tightened, sudden pressure building behind her sternum. The room's atmospheric readings hadn't changed, but her next breath came shallow and insufficient. She stood up too quickly, chair clattering backward, and reached for the door release. The magnetic seal didn't respond. On the wall monitor, she watched the oxygen percentage drop, 20.9%, 20.7%, 20.4%. The pressure reading climbed steadily. And in the corner of her vision, she saw it, a shimmer in the air near the water samples, like heat distortion, except the temperature hadn't changed. Her phone vibrated. Text message from an unknown number: seal the samples. Don't breathe deep. This is Sarah Voss. Roland gave me your contact information before he died. We need to talk about what's rising from the trench. James Okonkwo's monitors lit up simultaneously at 3:47 a.m., 16 atmospheric stations across 3 oceans registering identical pressure spikes. He'd been tracking anomalous data for the South African Weather Service for 8 years, but he'd never seen this, synchronized events separated by thousands of kilometers, all exhibiting the same 47-second duration. He cross-referenced the coordinates against his personal database, the one he maintained off the official servers. Every anomaly location matched a deep-sea research site. Puerto Rico Trench, Mariana Trench, Java Trench, Tonga Trench. All sites of significant oceanographic expeditions between 1973 and present. His phone rang before he could process the correlation. You're seeing it too. The woman's voice was American, strained. The pattern. My name is Maya Chen. I got your contact information from someone named Sarah Voss. She said your father was on the Challenger Deep expedition in 1973. James's throat went dry. He died 6 months ago. Respiratory failure. The doctors couldn't explain why his lungs just stopped processing oxygen properly. My mentor died the same way 3 weeks ago. And I've been having dreams, where you're drowning in air, James finished. Rooms full of oxygen that your body won't accept. I've had them for 4 months. Ever since I started investigating the atmospheric data near Cape Town's deep-sea research facilities. Maya's breath caught audibly. How many nights? Every night for the past week. Before that, maybe twice a month. Mine started 5 days ago. After I opened my mentor's research files. A pause filled with the sound of equipment humming in the background. James, the samples he left me are breathing. Actual seawater samples collected from the Puerto Rico Trench last year. They're exhibiting pressure fluctuations that follow respiratory rhythm. James pulled up his extended dataset, overlaying pressure anomalies with documented deep-sea missions. I've tracked 127 anomalous events in the past 18 months. They're accelerating. And they're all occurring at locations where research teams collected samples from trenches deeper than 8,000 meters. What did they bring up? I don't know, but my father's expedition logs mentioned something he called the breathing layer. A zone they discovered at 11,000 meters where the water exhibited properties inconsistent with known physics. The pressure readings fluctuated despite stable depth. Temperature variations that couldn't be explained by thermal vents. James's hands moved across his keyboard, pulling up scanned pages from his father's journal. He wrote that the water felt alive. Not containing life, but actually alive itself. Roland wrote the same thing. He said whatever's in the trenches predates Earth's oxygen atmosphere. Something that evolved in deep ocean darkness before photosynthesis existed. James found the entry he'd been searching for, his father's handwriting shaky in the final pages. My father's last journal entry says, it followed us up. Not in the samples, but through them. Like we opened a door by disturbing it. The others are having the dreams now. Hendricks, Voss, all of us who went down. We're breathing wrong. Our lungs remember something they've never experienced. James, the woman who contacted me, Sarah Voss. She was on that expedition. She's still alive. Then she knows what this is. And she knows why we're contaminated just from proximity to the research. James watched another pressure spike register across his monitors, this one off the coast of Japan. There's someone else we need to contact. Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology. She's been sending submersibles to the Japan Trench monthly for 2 years. If the pattern holds, she's contaminated too. We need to meet. All of us. Before whatever's rising from the trenches finishes spreading. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the control room of the research vessel Kaimei, watching her submersible descend through darkness on the monitor. 10,000 meters below, the Japan Trench waited, and somewhere in those depths was the answer to why she'd been drowning in her sleep for 6 weeks. Maya and James watched beside her via satellite video link, their faces pixelated but expressions clear. Behind them, Admiral Sarah Voss sat in Maya's Woods Hole laboratory, a woman in her 70s with the rigid bearing of someone who'd spent 50 years carrying a terrible secret. The breathing layer starts at 10,847 meters, Sarah said, her voice crackling through the speakers. In 1973, we thought we'd discovered a new type of hydrothermal ecosystem. The water there moved differently, pulsed with a rhythm we couldn't explain. We collected 17 samples. Yuki's submersible passed through 10,000 meters. The external pressure readings fluctuated subtly, a variation of 0.3% that standard equipment would dismiss as sensor noise. But Yuki had calibrated her instrument specifically to detect these microfluctuations after noticing them in her previous dives. "I'm detecting the pattern now," she reported. "Pressure oscillations, 47-second intervals. Like something breathing." On her screen, the water itself seemed to shimmer, particles moving in coordinated waves rather than random Brownian motion. The submersible's lights revealed something impossible. The water was denser in irregular pockets, creating visible boundaries between normal ocean and something else. "Collecting sample," Yuki announced, extending the mechanical arm. The collection cylinder filled with water from one of the dense pockets. On her instruments, the sample's properties immediately began changing, pressure climbing despite the sealed container. "Don't bring it to the surface," Sarah warned. "That's what we did wrong in 73. We thought deep-sea samples needed decompression protocols, gradual pressure reduction. But this water doesn't follow normal physical laws. It's not adapted to depth. It exists because of depth." Maya leaned closer to her camera. "What do you mean, exists because of depth?" "The breathing layer isn't a location. It's an entity. A form of life that developed in the deepest parts of Earth's oceans 4 billion years ago, before the atmosphere contained oxygen. It's pressurized consciousness, life that exists in the spaces between water molecules when pressure forces them into configurations that shouldn't be stable." James pulled up data on his screen. "You're saying the trenches contain a living organism made of compressed water?" "Made of the pressure itself," Sarah corrected. "Water is just the medium. We brought samples to the surface in 73, and in doing so, we brought a piece of that consciousness into an environment it had never experienced. Low pressure. High oxygen. It's been trying to adapt ever since, learning how to exist outside the deep." On Yuki's monitor, the submersible sample container began to deform, bulging outward despite being rated for external pressures far exceeding what it currently experienced. The water inside was generating its own pressure, expanding. "Jettison the sample," Maya urged. "Wait." Yuki adjusted her instruments. "The pressure fluctuations are forming patterns. Like it's trying to communicate." The submersible's communication array picked up something, rhythmic pulses in the water pressure translating to acoustic signals. Not random. Sequential. And when Yuki ran them through pattern recognition software, they resolved into something that made her blood freeze. Morse code. 3 words, repeated endlessly, "We are drowning." "Surface the submersible now," Sarah commanded, her composure finally cracking. "It knows we're there. It's learned to recognize us. That's why the contaminated are having dreams. It's marking everyone who's had contact with samples, trying to communicate that it's suffocating in our oxygen-rich surface water the same way we suffocate in its high-pressure environment." Yuki initiated emergency ascent procedures. "If it's suffering in surface conditions, why is it spreading? Why contaminate more people?" "Because it's dying," Sarah said quietly. "And it's trying to find someone who can help it go home." Admiral Sarah Voss's hands trembled as she opened the classified file she'd kept sealed for 50 years. Maya, James, and Yuki gathered around the monitor in Woods Hole's secure room, brought together by contamination and desperation. "The Challenger Deep expedition wasn't purely scientific," Sarah began. "It was a Cold War operation. The Navy suspected Soviet submarines were using deep trenches to hide from sonar. We went down to map acoustic signatures at extreme depths." She pulled up deteriorating photographs showing a younger version of herself in Navy uniform, standing beside men whose faces Maya recognized from obituaries. "At 11,000 meters, our instruments detected something impossible, organized pressure waves moving through the trench. Not geological. Not biological in any sense we understood. Intentional." James studied the acoustic readings. These patterns show coordination across 17 kilometers of trench floor. Like neurons firing in a distributed brain. That's exactly what Captain Hendricks proposed, Sarah confirmed. He theorized we discovered a form of consciousness that evolved in Earth's deep oceans before complex life existed on the surface. When the atmosphere was still methane and carbon dioxide, when pressure and darkness were the only constants, something developed in the trenches. Not cellular life. Something else. Intelligence emerging from the physical properties of water under extreme pressure. Yuki connected her laptop, displaying the data from her recent dive. The Morse code signal I received, "We are drowning." It's not metaphorical. The entity exists only in high-pressure environments. Every time we've brought samples to the surface, we've literally pulled pieces of its consciousness into conditions where it can't survive. But it's adapting, Maya added, pulling up Roland's research. The water samples are maintaining their pressure somehow, creating localized high-pressure zones even at surface level. And the contamination dreams. Are the entity trying to communicate? Sarah finished. When we brought those first samples up in 1973, we didn't just expose it to low pressure. We exposed it to human consciousness for the first time. To minds, to thoughts, to the concept of individual identity. It's been trying to understand us ever since, reaching out through the only medium it knows, pressure and breath. James checked his atmospheric data. The displacement events that killed contaminated individuals, your father, Roland, the others, weren't attacks. They were the entity attempting communication and accidentally creating pressure conditions that our bodies couldn't handle. Correct. Sarah's face hardened. But the military came to different conclusions. When expedition members started dying from unexplained respiratory failure, the operation was classified and buried. The official story became equipment malfunction. All samples were supposedly destroyed. Supposedly? Maya caught the emphasis. I kept one. Sample 17, collected from the deepest point we reached. I've maintained it in a pressure chamber in my home for 5 decades, running continuous observations. Sarah pulled up decades of data logs. It's been learning, growing more sophisticated in its attempts to communicate. The suffocation dreams became more detailed over time. The pressure patterns more complex. Yuki pulled up a map showing contamination spread. Every research institution that's conducted deep trench studies in the past 50 years is now experiencing pressure anomalies. It's not spreading randomly. It's reaching toward research facilities, toward people who study the ocean, trying to find someone who'll understand. It's lonely, Maya said suddenly. 4 billion years of existence in absolute darkness and isolation. Then suddenly it encounters minds, consciousness outside itself. It's been trying to connect with us, but the pressure differential is literally killing us both. Sarah nodded slowly. I've spent half a century trying to protect humanity from what I thought was a threat. But I was wrong. It's not trying to colonize surface. It's trying to communicate. And we're running out of time. Why now? James asked. Because deep-sea mining is about to begin commercial operations. Corporations planning to extract minerals from the trench floors, drilling into the breathing layer itself. If that happens... Sarah's voice trailed off. It'll have no choice but to rise, Yuki finished. To abandon the trenches entirely and try to survive in surface waters, even though it's lethal for both species. Maya felt her chest tighten, not contamination this time, but understanding. We need to help it go home. Find a way to return all the displaced consciousness back to the deep, seal the connection we created.